I feel like everybody didn't have to use the mic, and I have to use the mic. So, is it okay if I sit too, or no? Yeah, I'd rather get comfortable. So, I don't know, where am I supposed to start? Well, obviously, my name is Brian Poli-Dixon, and you guys got a little bit of my bio. I am from Tucson, Arizona. Went to UCLA from '97 to 2001, and then moved out here to pursue my NFL dream. In 2001, I've been here since. That was cut short a little bit. I was in the league probably 5 years, medical retired, and then didn't really know what to do, you know. The NFL and playing professional football, anything that you want to be successful at, you got to be all in, right? So I was all in on that, and then when it was to kind of taken away prematurely, I was kind of spinning and really didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. And then I think it's important to kind of take a second to figure out what's important, what your passions are, what are the things that drive you. If you want to wake up in the morning, and for me that was personal training or working out. That was something that came very natural to me, so I went into personal training, which I'm still in that now. I have a personal training business. And then art was something that was always connected to me and that I fell back in love with also. So it's kind of where I'm at now. So I've been doing art since, well, ever since I can remember. I've always been creative. Painting, drawing, doing classes, clay, all that kind of stuff. And I don't have a painting dated before 2013. 13 is when I got into painting. That really wasn't about trying to be like some kind of international artist or anything like that. It was just something that was connected to me that I wanted to explore and kind of get into. So 2013 was really about more of my discovery phase of kind of getting back into my artwork. And in that sense, at that time, I was doing a lot more metaphorical type of work. So I was doing work that really was trying to tell a story, and a lot of metaphors, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff that was going on in my head. And then as it's progressed, I'm still telling the story, but it just looks different, you know. So I mean, I have a studio, like Evan said. I've had a few different studios. So I had in Toronto, I do have a studio there. My girlfriend was living up there at the time. So I'm actually moving that studio now, and then I have a studio in Hollywood off of 95 in Sterling. So that's kind of like a dream studio. So when we were talking manifesting, I was going back to a moment, it was when I first moved into that studio, because I always wanted like a big space. So I got a 4,000 square foot studio gallery in Hollywood, which is amazing. I guess I'll stop by sometime. It's called the House of Genius. So, and you can see on my picture here, so Genius is like my branding, right? So I have a lot of different series, I do a lot of different creative things, but Genius is like my brand. So my studio is called the House of Genius. I sign my pieces Genius, or if I'm writing Genius, like people, I'm kind of synonymous with that. So with the messaging behind that is I like to highlight the last two letters of Genius, which are US. So that's us. So it's like, I'm not trying to say I'm the genius, I'm just trying to say that artwork and my creativity is one of my geniuses, and I'm trying to encourage other people to find what theirs is. So like that us is all of us, so it's inclusive. So I either want people to find what their genius is, and take that to the next level, or you already know what it is and elevate that. So that's kind of the messaging behind that for me. So all my artwork is all genius. So that's the top of the pyramid would be genius, and then I have my different series and stuff like that. Yeah, but I love what I do. I've had the opportunity to travel a lot of places, meet a lot of cool people, and just kind of understanding though that like how everything kind of connects. So I think if you want to be in this, you have to be, there's different kinds of artists, right? So just creating in general is one level of artist, and then if you have like a motivation to do something more, then you gotta have to kind of play the game, because it is a business too, So and it's one of these things that you have to be all in also. So, and you can't just be, you can create whatever you want to, but it's one of those things where like, you gotta be in the studio like it's a job, and you gotta be creating every day. And even if you don't put anything to canvas, at least you're in the studio, you got the energy, maybe you're painting on the wall and inspire something else, or, so that's one thing that I'm definitely dedicated to my craft, and I put a lot of time in on that. And now that I'm 10 years in now, I feel like now I'm just kind of getting started now. So, I think it takes a little while for people to, buy into what you got going on, and it's not just like a hobby, because if they want to invest in your work, obviously they want to make sure it's like, you're not here today, gone tomorrow, and the work's going to have value, So, yeah, don't know, so.
How'd you get started in arts?
Let's see, so I was always creative as a kid. So that was one thing that I definitely gravitated towards. You know, when we were in class, you got some of the kids that artwork looks a little bit better than the other ones. So I was always kind of like at the top of the class as far as art went. My mom got me into, in the summer times, I was always doing classes and workshops and stuff like that, but not with a dream to be an artist. My dream was to actually go to the NBA, but so I was always, doing creative things. My mom was always big on like how colors went together, aesthetics, composition on things, how to set up a room, all these kind of things like that. That kind of, I think, curated my mind in a different way, other than just just putting pen to paper. So I was always kind of connected that way. So then I went to UCLA, and I wanted to be an art major there on top of playing football. That was one of the reasons why I chose UCLA. But then it conflicted with the football schedule, so I committed to go to school there. And for me, with the art major, it wasn't to be an artist. It was to be go into creative directing, design, branding, marketing, and with LA being like a big media capital, that was one of the reasons why I chose the school. But it conflicted with the football schedule. So I wasn't able to do that as a major, so I kind of put the academic side of that on hold. And then went to the league. I spent about 5 years. Well, then I went to the combine, so I moved to Florida, went to the combine, and that's where I ripped my leg up pretty bad. And then that was kind of like put me on a different trajectory. So then I bounced around the league for about 5 years. I was on the Chargers, the 49ers, and the Saints for about 5 years. Kind of bittersweet because I didn't get to maximize my potential because of my injury. And then, I don't know if you guys know the show Big Brother. So I was a huge Big Brother fan. And I auditioned for the show, and then I made it down to like the last 30 people, so we had to go out to LA. So they said you were gonna be in your room for 20 hours a day for a week, and you only got to come out for like 4 hours a day. So they said bring stuff to do. And I didn't get to talk to anybody. You didn't get to use your name, couldn't talk to anyone, because for the gameplay. So they said bring stuff to do, so I brought, pen, paper, stuff like that, paint, and I just was painting and drawing the whole time in there. And then I got to talk to production, so I would come out every day and I'd give them something, So that was kind of like my spark that got me back into painting. So it was like I was disappointed I didn't get the show, but at the same time, I think that was my purpose for being there, was to kind of get back into that. And I've just kind of been just going full steam with that. Yeah, so I think it's just always, I think as an artist though too, it's always, you kind of have that burning desire that it's like that thirst always for like what's next. So it's like if you make a painting, I always fall in love with the last painting I made. So then it's like, all right, well then, now what's the next painting? What's the next painting? What's the next painting? And then it's kind of funny because then you look back at like paintings you did maybe like 3 months ago, and you're like, don't love that as much. I mean, I love it, but it's not the same as now I love this one, So, and then as far as like the craft of it, that's why the dedication comes into it, because it's like, I think as an artist too, like what I'm saying, like with chasing what the next painting is or chasing what that next inspiration is, there's also putting in the hours, because if I could get like what's in my head out through my hand, then it's gonna be a problem, but in a good way. So I think that putting in the hours is kind of like building the connection between like your brain and the brush, or your brain and whatever vehicle you're using to, manifest whatever your imagination can take you. So I think that's where like it's important to put the hours in. And then also the business side of things, right? So like that's where like the not so fun part comes in, because as an artist, I think most people, we just want to create, make, and then it's kind of like, then you kind of just expect it to sell because you posted it, or because somebody saw it, And then I wish that was the case, but I think, and also when someone's looking at a painting, so someone comes into a gallery, or someone comes into a space and they see a price tag on a painting, they're already in their head for the most part trying to monetize like how you came up with that price. So that's where like the business side of things, like maybe having a website, are we represented by a gallery? Are you doing stuff like this? So even though like this isn't about sales, it is about sales, because it shows like the people, your buyers, your collectors, people, we're thinking about it like, all right, this guy's serious. He's doing the next situation. You're kind of staying relevant. It's on brand. So it's important to do, the networking, surround yourself with other artists, obviously, you want to be around like-minded people in any kind of capacity. And creativity inspires creativity. So I like to try to have a lot of my art friends over at the studio, or my DJ friends, like they can, practice their music and stuff like that, or people sing, they play instruments, stuff like that. I always try to have that creativity around me because it's inspiring, So I think that's also very, very important.
How about your photography?
I did do photography for a long time too, so I kind of think I'm multidisciplined as far as art goes, but it's just more just because I have a thirst to be creative. So I was heavily into photography before I started painting, so I was shooting everything. I didn't want to do I didn't want to go shoot your party, but I wanted to I love doing candid pictures of people, architecture, lighting, animals, stuff like that. So I have an extensive catalog of photography that now I've kind of reintroduced back into my work too. So I'll take a lot of this photography too and I'll paint on top of it, So that's kind of like a nice juxtaposition between, the two styles right there. And then, but I think as an artist though too, people always ask what inspires you, right? That's number one question. So I think you're either, if you're open, almost like blessings. If you're open to your blessings, then you're gonna, then you'll receive them. But if you're not open to it, then it's kind of closed and you're kind of searching, you're like, why not me, why not me? But for me, I've always been very open to inspiration. So I think, for me personally, I walk and look at things different than the average person who's not creative. So it's if I'm walking into a room, I've already looked at the lighting, how things are setting up, the composition of things, so I'm already looking for inspiration, even just in a space like this. People inspire me. Like I was telling Evan before in a previous conversation we had, but it's taking a walk through the park is the same inspiration for me as going to a gallery. So it's kind of I used to see things in a series of pictures all the time. So it was if I'm walking around, people I'm oh, just everything is a frame, So I don't know if it was on some Rain Man type of thing. So I kind of, I'm always just open to, and I'm constantly taking pictures. I take pictures of a lot of things, and I'm constantly writing a lot of notes. So things that inspire me, if I'm watching a movie, I write it down. If I have a dream, I'll write it down. Someone says something cool, I'll write it down. And then I kind of go back and I'm looking for inspiration through these little things that I've gathered along the way. And I was really big into words for a while, with Genius. I was putting Genius on everything. So also so I have these characters. I have a few different series. So I have my Genius characters, which are, I'm an abstract painter too, by the way. So I'm a kind of contemporary abstract. And I used to use a lot of words, but Genius was, so I made this character, it was a self-portrait. And one of the things I wrote down in my notes was, that's genius. I mean, not saying I made that up, but it stuck with me for a reason, for some reason. And I made this self-portrait and I put genius on the forehead. And that was kind of the inspiration of that. So then I was putting genius on everything. And then I kind of realized too, it's when you're creating, you kind of have to try to find this balance between who you are as an artist and what your signature is, and then also what people gravitate towards and what sells to. So that's for the business side of things with the analytics and kind of understanding if you do inventory of your work, what people are gravitating towards. So with the words, it kind of felt that was a little 50-50 for me. Not just with the word genius, but let's say if I would put intentional or inspiring or some kind of word on it, now I'm locking that person into that word. So that person, if it didn't have the word on it, they might have gravitated towards it, but now when I put the word on it, now I'm kind of corralling you to have to, channel that. So I was doing a lot of wordplay, but my series I have, let's see, so I have my Genius series, which are the faces, abstract faces that you have to relate to on your own. So they're not necessarily something that I'm saying that this piece means that, it's just the concept of genius. So that would be a genius character, and then however that person would see that character for themselves, or maybe it reminds them of somebody else. So I have that. I have a floral series, which kind of comes from my mom back in the day too, because I used to always have fun going picking flowers or buying flowers and kind of coordinating that situation. And then, when she'd walk in the room, the flowers would be there. So flowers are one of those things where it's people say give a person their flowers, right? So it's giving them credit for something, or some kind of emotion attached to it. So it's like celebration, death, just because, some kind of happiness, something like that. So it's kind of like just a feeling. So it's not necessarily if it has like some deep meaning to one of my flower series. It's just kind of more of like just that feeling of like whatever that encompasses for you when someone gets flowers. Let's see, what else do I have? I have my Flamingo series, which I just created recently, which because it's like, who doesn't like flamingos? So that's kind of like a cool, then I still incorporate them, so I'll do like flamingo geniuses, or, and I'll try to mix my series together. Then I have a Cubism series, which I was in, during COVID, I was in Toronto for 11 months, and everything had shut down. And I had like one last hurrah to go to the art store, and I was like, let me just get a bunch of stuff. And my style is it's not as cerebral as it might look, because I'm a very like, whatever the moment and the feeling is for the moment. I mean, I might know what I want to do, but as far as how I get there, I gotta figure that part out. I would say of 100 paintings, I would say 95 of my paintings, I have no direction on it before I start. Unless it's something that I know I'm specifically doing, I have to get there, or it's a commission that's different. But so all the art stores closed down, so then I was like, well, how am I gonna make sure I don't blow through all these paintings in 2-3 months, and I have something that's gonna last me? So that's what I came up with the Cubism series, which was very methodical, much more cerebral, and it was all straight lines. Like most of my work doesn't have a straight line in it, so now all this work was all straight line, taped out, and it really slowed me down, and I kind of developed that style there. I have one more style. What's the last one I have?
Collabs?
Yeah, I've done some collabs, but last style too. So I did this series called Life is Lived Outside the Box, which I would take a painting and then I would flip it to the back, and not say that that's original, the paint's on the back of the painting, but then I would put a plexiglass over the back of it, and I would build like this little box, so it would hang backwards. But I wanted it to look intentional, so if I put the plexiglass on it, then it was like, oh, okay, he did a little more than just paint on the back. So it's called Life is Lived Outside the Box, and I'll take a concept. So like going back to like the notes I take, stuff like that, I might take a concept. So I did like, I Don't See Color was one of the that did pretty well. I made like 8 of those, and those all went pretty quickly. But so I put I Don't See Color in like rainbow colors with a black background, and then boxed it. And then people, because so the concept of that is, yes, people do see color, and it's okay to see color, because that's what makes things beautiful, and we're all unique in our own way. So people oftentimes say, I don't see color, and to a person of color, it's offensive, because it's like, yes, you do see me, or you're saying you don't see me, right? So what people are really trying to say is, I'm not judging somebody by the color of their skin, right? So when I put that on there, it's kind of like a little bit of a shock value, because it's kind of like, some people are like, oh no, I don't like that. I see color. I'm like, oh, that's the point. So I'm boxing the concept on that. So it's Life is Lived Outside the Box. So that's another series. Yeah, then collabs. So that's why it's important to get out there and be around like-minded people, because I've found a lot of success from other artists. So like a lot of times people think that they want to keep everything so tight. Like, oh, if I just learn this new technique, or if I have this style, or I have this connection to this shipper or gallery or something like that, they want to hold that situation tight to themselves, because they feel like, I don't know, maybe like they're going to buy their painting and not, or buy my painting and not buy their painting. When really, I feel like in life in general, I feel like the more that you give, the more that you get. And I'm not saying that in a sense of like, that's like my strategy. I've always kind of been like that, and I just kind of see that that's how that works. So I met a lot of like-minded artists and done a lot of cool collabs. I've worked with GoDaddy. I've worked with some other artists that are around town. Collabs are a little tricky. I feel like they are a little tricky. I can't say that the collabs I've done with other artists have done well, but at the same time, you're expanding your network, right? So it's an opportunity to kind of tap into somebody else's network as well. So, yeah.
Any advice for aspiring emerging artists?
Advice for aspiring emerging artists, I would say don't overthink it. I would say paint first and worry about what it is second. you know, the first thing is just trying to just get something out there, right? So, and also don't wait for inspiration. You know, like this is something you want to do. I mean, you got to work at it. You know, because I said, like, you know, it's trying to get what's in your brain out through your hand, and that's where the muscle memory and the, you know, all the hours that you put in that make a difference. But then also for inspired artists too, is like, you know, making sure you're out there in the mix with other like-minded people. You know, no, like I said, creativity inspires creativity. So I mean, when I go to other people's shows, studios, I'm constantly looking at what they're doing, for sure. And I'm gonna try to take that somehow, but make it my own. So, I mean, obviously we're not copying, but everybody's inspired by everybody. So, it's important to, you know, get out there and mix and do your homework and get online, and, you know, and really be a student of the game, you know. Because if you wanna do something, there's a lot of amazing artists out there, so you have to try to find a way to separate yourself, you know. And then eventually you'll develop a style. I think they say it takes an artist like 5-6 years to kind of develop their own language. Yeah. So that's it.
Questions from the audience?
No question. Hey, Brian. Can you speak to maybe mindset or perseverance? You know, I think you got into the league, not easy to do. You know, got out of the league, probably even harder to do. And what have you really learned on a mindset perspective that you apply, you know, going forward to your success?
Thanks for the question. Mindset-wise, well, I've always been like a glass half full guy. You know, even when I'm down, I kind of still walk around like everything's going to be okay. So I think with my mindset, and it was a dark time for me when the league was done, because I felt like that was something that was taken from me. I really didn't have a choice on it, you know. And but I've always just kind of just persevered and, you know, used it as motivation. If something's not going the way I want it to, I mean, I think a lot of times people can dwell on all the reasons why something's not, but I feel like if you can focus more on like the yes rather than the no. So it's like, what are these things that I have to do in order to get that done, rather than looking at it like, these are all the things and the reasons why I can't get it done. You know, and then also too, it's having like, you know, number one, believing in yourself, and then also my support team. I've had like a lot of good people around me too, between family and friends, and you know, I have a great network, and I'll lean on my network too. So I'm the kind of guy too that's like, I'll ask for the hookup, but I'm trying to hook up as many people as possible too. So I think with that kind of mix right there, and being able to understand your network and the opportunities that are out there, and then just kind of just with the mindset of just, I'm not gonna sit here and say that I've developed that mindset. I feel like I've always had that mindset. And I think that it's kind of like sometimes some people need to work at certain things more than others, and some people have certain things that they're born with, and you gotta try to explore that. But I feel like just kind of having a positive mindset and just knowing, just the deep down like fulfillment of knowing that I'm gonna work it out.
How do you take the lessons that you learned in athletics and apply them to your craft now? And then how do you see how your identity has developed since leaving athletics? I mean, you can see in your photo that you still brand yourself as an athlete in art, so I'm just interested to hear your perspective on that.
Sorry, what was the first question? Say that again.
How do you take the lessons that you've learned in athletics?
Well, I think it's just discipline, right? So I think it's, you know, one of the things, and I've always been the guy of like, just because we're all in a class together and we all do one project, like that's not enough, you know? So it's like we all did that. So now how am I gonna separate myself from this group now? So now I gotta go put the work in on my own. So it's like, I did that in sports all the time, and I do that in, you know, painting. So, you know, guys are like, you know, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, I'm in the studio. Again? Yeah, I'm in the studio, this is what I do, you know? So I've just been very disciplined always in my life, you know? And I've been always very, very motivated. And I think that's what breeds success. So I think that's kind of one of the things that just is, you know, pretty consistent through anything that I do. You know, so I think that was something that I wouldn't necessarily say that that's what I took from sports, but that's just something that has made me successful both in sports and in the businesses that I have now. And then, well, another thing with the concept that's a little bit different with sports, that like one thing that art has taught me that sports I don't think ever could was the fact that like in sports it's like the best person's gonna play. You know, they don't care who your dad is, or unless you go to USC or something. But for the most part, the best player is gonna play. So they don't really care what you're doing off the field, it's about what you're doing on the field. In art, it's much different. You know, so now it's like, you don't necessarily have to be the best artist, but it's like, what's the story? So like, that's where like the business and the marketing come into building that story, then it gets the buzz going, and now people look at you differently, you know? So like with the branding, it's funny, like when I walk around, I don't walk around as Brian, the ex-football player, Brian the athlete. I mean, people ask me because I'm tall and black, that they play sports all the time, but as far as like, I feel like galleries or like, you know, events that I've done or certain things like that, I feel like people have branded me more that than I branded myself. This picture I did was actually at UCLA, so they did a story about me at the school, and I thought this was a pretty cool concept. So I actually like this painting, or this picture, but I don't, people want me to push the whole athlete thing more, but I feel like for me, I feel like it's a little played out. You know, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of athletes that paint. So it's like, oh yeah, how does an athlete go from playing sports to painting, when really I feel like I was painting before I was an athlete, you know? So that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Have you had a creator's block? And if so, how long did it last? And if so, have you used psychedelics for it?
Wow, that's good. Creative block, I'd say my blocks come more when my mind isn't right, not necessarily for the artwork, but just in general. So let's say that like I broke up with my girlfriend or something, and now I'm kind of like, that's all in my head, and then I'm trying to paint, but it's not coming out that way, you know? And then with the creative block, I think my space is so inviting and creative and motivating that, and I paint on the wall. So let's say if I can't get it on the canvas, or if I'm working on a piece, I know when it's not flowing right. And I mean, you can mess a piece up too, if you're trying to paint on a piece that you're working on and you're not in the right headspace. So that's when I'll move like to the wall. You know, so I mean, all my walls, you know, for the most part, in my studio are painted. You know, so if I'm not feeling it on the canvas, I'll paint the floor, I'll paint the wall, and then or if I'm on a canvas, I know that like maybe for that day it didn't work, but then now these are like extra layers that now are going to be for the next time that I come in. So I definitely a lot into layering, and I think my artist friends like, I don't know how you did that, but like sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I got there either, you know, because it's like, you know, it's just like this creative process of layering and feeling and stuff like that, and then I'll kind of cut it back and then kind of find the painting within the painting later. But I would say that to get rid of the block though, I think you just move your mind space from whatever you think you're blocked on to something else, or get out, go do something else, or get on the wall, or write something simple, but like just not think necessarily. Just kind of just get something out, just to kind of get it out. What was it? Was that a two-part question? Oh, it's psychedelics. I have used psychedelics before, like shrooms and stuff like that, but not as my vehicle for my creativity, but just kind of to explore that a little bit. And I mean, it's fun. I mean, sometimes it's like it's one of those things where you look at it the next day and you're like, holy shit, like, what was I even doing there? But I mean, I don't like to use anything though to rely on my creativity. So I think as an artist though too, I can see how a lot of artists though could become addicts though, because you spend a lot of time by yourself. You know, so I spend hours and hours and hours by myself. I mean, I go out to dinner by myself. Not that I don't have friends, but I'm just like in my own space with that. So, but I never wanted to have a situation to where a bad habit or some kind of drug or alcohol or something like that was like my company, you know, because I think that bad habits and addictions keep people company, you know, and I didn't want to have that. I mean, sure, I can have fun in my studio, but it's never been a vehicle for me for my creativity.
Yeah, so my question is, I work with kids and I really am about, you know, focusing on their passions and and especially like with education, and you seem like you're really passion driven.
Mhm.
So I wanted you to share a little bit about that. I mean, from being in sports to art and how your passion's kind of driven you, but also who are your inspirations?
Thanks. Yeah, I've always been passionate. I think that's the key ingredient you have to be successful in general, you know? Like, so the first genius painting that I made, which was a self-portrait, it's called The Professor. And I mean, it doesn't look like me, but it's me. And it's kind of like I'm giving like a little bit of a lesson. So on the board, on the chalkboard, I put a few words on it. So passion was one of the words. 1 + 1 is 1 in the sense of, most times people think in relationships like it's 50-50, but really it's, you give me 100, I give you 100, it's 100. Do things now, now was on there. But I think with passion though, it's like, either you're passionate about something or you're not. I don't think you can fake it. You can work hard and be disciplined towards something, but I think if you mix now the passion with the discipline is when you have an opportunity for success. And what was the second part of the question?
Who are your inspirations?
Oh, inspirations. Well, one, I got guy's shirt on right now, which is Basquiat. I like a lot. I mean, I like a lot of artists. I mean, there's countless artists, but I'm inspired by everybody's work. I'll come in here and look at. I mean, I'm taking pictures of things in here that I'm inspired by. So, I'm more like one of my good friends, Bradley Theodore. He's an amazing artist. Like when I walk around too, like I don't care about celebrity, but like if I see like an artist that I know, I'm like, oh, I gotta go talk to them. You know? So I'm inspired by, you know, creative people. That's my inspiration, and people who work hard and go after what they want. So I mean, but I think passion though is something that, you know, you got to kind of channel. I think a lot of times people are trying to figure out like what they want to do or like what's the job. But I think if they kind of like hone it all back and like what are the things that they really love and enjoy and what they're passionate about. So, yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming and telling us your story. And you talked about your inspiration. And during the introduction, Evan mentioned your background. And I'm just curious what influence that had on your art making, your background.
Background as far as like my parents?
Yeah, your family.
Well, as far as my mom went, I was saying how like, you know, aesthetics and composition and colors and stuff like that. So she was kind of like my first like teacher as far as how to look at something a little bit different. And then like with the flowers, that was a big inspiration, me doing that for her, not knowing that like that's also like colors and texture and you know, composition with that, which now it's in my life. And then see, so that my mom was Italian, my mom is white Italian from Brooklyn, New York, and then my dad is Black American from Orangeburg, South Carolina. So like these two are like the most opposite people I've ever met. And I don't know, I asked them both, I don't know how you guys even got together, but which they're not together anymore, but so I just kind of think, and then like growing up, right? So growing up, it's a lot different now, you know, like multicultural relationships is a lot more common now. I mean, you look at TV, I mean, that's pretty much what people show now. Also, my last name being Poli-Dixon, my mom never changed her last name when I was born, so Poli-Dixon with the hyphen is on my birth certificate, which now people, you know, they hyphenate their names. But growing up, you know, with the white mom, black dad, and it was kind of like, all right, I hang out with my white friends, then my black friends are like, oh, you're hanging out with them. Or if I'm hanging out with the black guys, and then it's like, oh, now what you know what's the deal. So I was kind of like, had this little like weird kind of dynamic between identity. Not saying I didn't know who I was, but it was like more people kind of figuring out who I was, you know? So kind of navigating that situation, but that's where like sports came in. So with sports and being able to make people laugh, but with sports, I mean, it's like sports and music are things that like, it doesn't matter what color you are, everybody kind of comes on the court or comes in plays together, and then you kind of have that dynamic there. So that was always something that kind of got me through that. But then my dad, not really so much on the inspirational side as far as the artwork goes, but you know, just kind of just having the two different cultures and kind of looking at things in a different light. I mean, I would say that's probably kind of some of the influence.
One last question for me. So, because I'm going to use my opportunity here. So hopefully it's not too played out except being the athlete artist, because we have an athletics exhibition in the fall, and hopefully you can come back. Because I'm personally fascinated how you could go from a profession that relies on the 10 other people on the field and more on the team to going to being like an individual. Like your success, you said you spend all that time alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I would really like to hear that.
Yeah, and when I say played out, I'm not like taking that away from myself. I'm just saying I identify more as just an individual rather than what I did. And I was saying like too, I don't think that I went from sports to art. I think I went from art to sports back to art. So that's kind of like in the story of that, it kind of like always is, oh, you played sports, now you're an artist. So I kind of keep on hearing that. So that's the part that I say I feel like it's played out for me at least, what was?
No, that was just a
Yeah,
comment.
yeah.
I just come back.
Yeah, I'll be back. I mean, I do embrace it. I mean, obviously you see on the picture here, I do embrace it. I just don't identify with it as who I am. When I walk around the streets, I walk around as an artist. I introduce myself as an artist. And then later on it comes out that I play ball and stuff like that. And people think, and also I think a little bit for me too, because it was so bittersweet for me and it didn't really go the way I wanted it to, it's kind of like still like a little bit of a painful spot for me that I've gotten to terms with it, but it's still like a sore spot for me. I think, and for me too, I think that the losses I've suffered in my life hurt more than the wins feel good. So that's just kind of something that's kind of always stuck with me, because it was kind of like you were there, but really didn't get to fulfill that situation. So like even if I do like, say my buddy has like a celebrity bowling tournament or something like that, like, oh, we want to put you as one of the celebrities. I'm like, well, for what? Like, so it's kind of always kind of like, so a lot of my friends in my network always kind of push back to me, like, give yourself credit for that, you did this, you did that, but like, I always kind of look at it like, did I fulfill my goal on that? So that's why I kind of feel like maybe when I say played out, is just maybe I just don't identify it with the same.
Thank you.
Any last questions?
Hi, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks.
I struggle sometimes with focus and creative, and that like creativity flows through me, and I was wondering if you ever deal with how to focus, channel, and like execute things. It sounds like you're very disciplined, so I'd love to know more about what that process looks like for you, and how you channel creativity into a discipline or into a brand of like genius. This is what we are, and to like quiet the this isn't genius right now.
Right.
This has to be genius, right?
Right.
And where those not even compromises, but where you channel that and focus that. Yeah.
That's a good question, thanks. Well, I think that, that's where, like, going back to discipline, right? So now it's like if I'm in the studio, so if I'm waiting for creativity, then I could be waiting sometimes for a month, So, but if you're in the studio, things start happening, you start developing new techniques, something goes on the wall, it gives you some inspiration for something else. But that's where, for me, that's where I have like my different series. So, like let's say if I was doing all genius faces, I get bored too, I don't want to just do all genius. When I see some artists, like they have the same, maybe the subject matter is different, but it's the same style, the same, like that drives me crazy. So that's why I kind of like, I'm not inspired as much like that. So then I kind of like jump into a new series, right? So, but like my very first art show I had, it looked like I had like 5 different artists on the wall, So it's kind of had a little bit of everything. I like to look at everything. When people come in like, oh, who did these ones? I'm like, I didn't know. Well, who did those ones? I did. So it's kind of like, what is it really telling the story right there? So then like as you go on, you kind of understand you got to tell the story within the show, within your work, and whatever your branding is. So now when I have my different series, if I get tired of doing something, then I can jump to flowers. And then I kind of start building these little sub-series. So then I can kind of have like a show of just flowers. I can have a show of just this. So that's kind of how I get away from the monotony of just kind of going back to work. And then having multiple canvas up at one time. So one of the cool things about my space now is I could hang them on my work side. I could hang like 14 pieces at once if I want to, and then work on all those, Before my other studio, I was a much smaller studio that could only really kind of put 2 big pieces on the wall. So let's say if I was working on those and I knocked them out and I loved them, now that I'm not working on them and I try to go back and I'm like, oh, I want to make some more of these. Now I'm like I told you before, like I come in sometimes inspired, I do some marks on there, maybe they didn't work, the next day I do some different marks. So it's kind of like hard to figure out sometimes how I got to that painting. So I think also too, if you put up multiple canvas at one time, you can kind of like tap into the feel at the moment. So if I'm in that moment on this, I can do a little bit on this one, do a little bit on this one, and it's all gonna have that same cohesive feel because that was the moment at the time rather than trying to go back and try to create that moment. Yeah, but then I mean, as far as like being inspired, I mean, that's where, you know, the inspiration, you have to be open to it, you know? So I'm looking at lighting, I'm looking at how the sun hits something, shadows, I mean, so it's kind of like, it's kind of always been there. But I would say, as far as getting out that, keeping focus is, you know, having multiple options, different things like that. And also, what I like to do, I think maybe for a block, when we're talking about block, but let's say if I'm, a lot of times, let's say if I'm working on one piece, I'll have a side canvas, so like a side, like, piece of paper or some kind of like small canvas next to me that I'll use as like cleaning off my brushes. But I'll use that as a canvas on the side. So I've sold that side piece a lot because now I'm not thinking on that side piece, right? So it's just kind of like, and whatever colors are coming out randomly, I don't care if they even mix on this. And then you come up with something amazing on the side because you're not really thinking about it, you know? So it's something I like as well.
What you responded to, I mean, all of what you responded to is completely inspiring.
Thank you.
And in reference to the NFL thing and all that, it's like things happen in our lives because we're supposed to become who we are authentically.
Right.
And that's what I hear with you, and like that's our purpose. It's like to become as most authentic and become in line, and we hit these obstacles so that we can redirect to stay in line in order to find it. So I really appreciate your talk and your honesty. It was big.
Well, thanks. And the one word I used to put on a lot of geniuses too was authentic. You know, being your authentic self. And I do believe that everything happens for a reason. So I think either you believe that or you don't believe that. You know, you can't pick and choose when you want to believe that. You know, and sometimes you don't see it at the time, right? So like me not getting on Big Brother. You know, I was bummed out, but I was meant to, you know, get back into the art. Me going to the league, you know, maybe that happened to me because I was gonna have head trauma or something like that. So I kind of, you know, I look at it back, you know, kind of work backwards. So, but yeah, so I definitely agree that, you know, all the trials, tribulations, ups and downs get you to where you want to be at the moment, and that's what makes you a well-rounded person.
Amen. Last question. I know you've had a lot of highlights. If you could just share from your UCLA experience, highlight on the football side and highlight on the LA culture art side of being in LA.
Well, I would say my biggest highlight would go a little bit before UCLA, but it was going into UCLA. So I started playing football in my sophomore year of high school, so I'd never played football before. So I played 3 years and then was able to earn a full scholarship anywhere I wanted to go. So I think that was like probably like my most surreal highlight, like was entry level going into UCLA. And then just being like, you know, from a small town, Tucson's like a big small town, but just kind of having that, and I knew that there was nothing that was going to keep me in Tucson. You know, I knew I had to get out and see something else. So kind of like that transition from Tucson to LA and then now being like in this big city with all this stuff going on and playing ball, that was probably like my most inspiring thing, was just kind of like just getting there, you know. And then on the field, so we had a lot of situations that were so close, but we came down, I'd say the pinnacle of, it was like my sophomore year. We were number 2 in the country. I led the Pac-10 in Pac-10 at the time in touchdowns that year. We came out to Miami. We came out here actually in '98, and we played the Hurricanes. The last game of the season, we were number 2, and we would have went to the national championship if we would have won that game. But so that was a highlight and a low light in itself. But that was probably like the biggest stage or moment, I would say.
And you had a great game, I think.
Yeah, I had a good game, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you very much, Brian.